Welcome. I hope everybody is full physically now as we're about to get some more food for our soul. If you haven't met me yet, I am Pastor Kate. As of a week ago, I am the pastor at Westminster Presbyterian, and it has been a wonderful week, and I can already tell how warm and welcoming everybody is. It is such a treat to see this wonderful turnout for soul food suppers. I think this is at the heart of what a lot of Westminster is about.
Does anybody have any idea how many years we've been doing this? No, you can't. You know. You cooks know exactly. Deborah? No. 8 years. 8 years. And each year, whenever Dozier or somebody sets out in the fellowship in Bullock Hall after worship the first week and asks you to sign up, and there's 20 people signed up, and we go home and say, we ain't doing this anymore. And then by the time the meal happens, we've got 75 or 80 people. And all of these, when we're done, out on the credenza in the back, there's a basket for contributions. Robert has a mission program he's going to talk about for street kids in Kenya. He also has a book that he and another gentleman wrote together, and I have read it, Pat has read it. It's his story. I can't imagine this guy's even still around. But it's marvelous, and those books are going to be on sale. Linda Bridges, we flipped coins to see who we trusted the most to handle money, and she won out. and she's going to be selling his books, and he may be talking about that. They're $15, and it's a wonderful book.
Like Harry said, I'm Lynn Gustafson, and before I introduce the speaker, I just wanted to tell you as a church, thank you. I am not a member of this church, but I have never felt as if I'm a stranger here. Hope I can say this without choking up. Y'all are just a warm congregation with a heart that I come back to every January for that soul food. So thank you for always being welcoming and feeding me, and feeding me more than just physically, but spiritually. I really appreciate it, so thanks. And now to the speaker, Robert. I have a connection with Robert through the wife of the author of the book. And she had emailed me last spring and said that her husband's book was about to launch, and told me what time and where. So I went, and that's when I got the book. And talked to Robert then about an opportunity he might have for speaking. And then when Harry texted me this fall or in the summer and said, hey, do you still have a contact? I said, I sure do. And so I gave him the information, and here we are. I did not expect to be here in front of you to introduce Robert, but I am more than happy to. He has quite a story to tell growing up in Brooklyn, and what he experienced as he grew up there with the kind of culture he was living in regards to the mob and that lifestyle. I told him that I can't relate to it. I'm a Texas girl, but it certainly opened my eyes and helped me understand where so many other people come from that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, no matter what job we have or where we live. So the story he has to tell about his change of heart and how he's come to be where he is today is quite impelling and quite inspirational in regards to the effect we can have on the people around us from day to day. So with that, I'll introduce Robert Borelli.
Makes me feel taller from up here. I always wanted to look down on you people because you've always been looking down on me. Anyway, my name is Robert Borelli, but that was not always my name. Before I go any further, I want to give you a Brooklyn greeting. How you's doing? Okay, now you got to work with me on this. I say that and you say, forget about it, okay? Let's try it again. How you's doing? There you go. Now that makes me feel at home, so it makes me more comfortable. Anyway, yes, my name is Robert Borelli. It is today. Wasn't always that name. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. You know what? Let me just say this here before I get into my story. I have read somewhere, I don't remember where I read it, but was reading a book, And it said something that really touched me, and so this way you can understand where I'm from and where I'm at today. It said, if you rely on education, you'll get everything education can give you. If you rely on eloquence, you'll get everything eloquence can give you. But when you rely on the Holy Spirit, you get everything God can give you. And that's just my story, because I'm not well educated. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I totally missed that part of my life, not being educated. And you could tell by the way I speak that I'm not an eloquent speaker, because y'all talk different than I talk. Anyway, so I just thought you'd know that about me. I really rely on the Spirit of God in me to relate and to communicate what He wants me to say, and I pray about it before I even come to speak to anybody. But I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to come here and be able to share my story. Okay, now we'll go. Robert Borelli, not my name, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Had three types of people that I could identify when I was growing up. And one was my mom and dad, of course, living in the household. And my mom and dad, it was tough. My mom was trying to raise 5 children, actually 4 at that time, and work and raise children, because we come from a kind of a poor neighborhood, and that's just our status. And I used to hear my mom and dad always arguing about finances, and that would be always the heat of the argument. They didn't have enough money for this, they didn't have enough money for that. But also in my neighborhood, it was very racial. I mean, every 4 square blocks that you had either Italians, Irish, Germans, blacks, Hispanics. It was very racial too. Now, I went to Catholic school, and my Catholic school was in a black neighborhood, and the public school that the blacks used to go to was right around the corner from my house. So we had to walk past one another all the time, and there was always conflict. It was always a fight. So that's just how I grew up. I grew up not knowing much other than fighting my way to school, getting humiliated in school. So I kind of, in a sense, maybe became what people were showing me I should have been. I'm not using that as an excuse, because there's some people in my neighborhood who have been very successful. I'm just telling you my story, not theirs. So doing that then, growing up and fighting and all that, so now I started hanging around with these guys from the club, and I was a young kid, and they would give me chores to do, and I would go on errands. And I don't know if you ever know about this here, but if you can even relate to this, but one of the things that he asked me to do when I was really young was to go and buy a bucket of steam. Now, I did not know that you cannot buy a bucket of steam. So I went into the store, and that was kind of like my initiation as a kid, a joke. And I went into the store, asked for the bucket of steam, and the guy chased me out of the store, thinking I was crazy. But I did keep the quarter that they gave me. I didn't give it back to them. So that was kind of like a way that they used to do if they liked you. They would play pranks on you like that. But then I started doing other things for them. And if they had a card game, I would work the card game and serve food or drinks and get tips like that. And I was doing pretty good with that, selling fireworks. But what happened at the age of about 17 years old, I ended up having a job in Queens, and I was driving on the, I wasn't driving, I was actually on the bus, and I met somebody, and his dad was one of the wise guys. And I started hanging out with him. And of course, I left my job and just started hanging out with him. We started doing a lot of things. And one of the things that we would do a lot was we would go into bars. That's what we did. And we hang out and we would drink. And, a lot of times fights happen. Let me just say this here. What you're going to hear is I want you to understand that I'm not trying to glorify my past. This is really a God story. It's not a Robert Borelli story. So you're going to hear some things that maybe you're not going to want. But I think in order to let you know where I was and what God has taken me out of is the best way to do it. So at that age and hanging out in bars, a fight broke out, and this one incident, somebody was killed in the fight. The next day, I found out that I was one of the guys that the cops were looking for. My friend's dad, being all the connections that he had, decided to hide me out. And I say that to you because that was kind of my introduction into what we know today called the Gambino crime family. It's one of the 5 families in New York City's Mafia. He hid me out for a while, and about a year and a half later, I ended up getting arrested. And my first arrest as a young kid, 20 years old, was for 2 murders and possession of a weapon. And I laid up in jail waiting for a bail to come, and of course, they got me a decent lawyer, and the lawyer knew some of the judges, and I had to wait and delay things until I went in front of the right judge, so this way they knew that they would be able to work and get me a low bail so I could get out. And I only say that to say this here because that was, if you want to say it, and I'm going to say it, was kind of my introduction, kind of like my claim to fame in the Gambino crime family, because right after that, these guys would take me around and they'd bring me to all the bosses down on Mulberry Street and wherever they were, into the big parties, weddings, and all that, and they would introduce me as the up-and-coming star in the Gambino crime family. And I'll tell you what that did to me. That made my head really big. And what happened is I became a legend in my own mind. And the danger of becoming a legend in your own mind is now you have to convince everybody else that you're a legend in their mind. And I did do that. And I was very successful in doing that. You see, I didn't command respect, I demanded it. And if you didn't respect me, you would suffer the consequences of disrespecting me. And that's just how my lifestyle was. But you see, what happened was I was working in what we call a dice game. It's called crap games. I don't know if you understand that term. But it's, in New York, it's not legal. And we would have them behind maybe factories or a storefront or something like that. And we'd have some crap games. And people would come in there and they would gamble. And there's one guy lost about $20,000. And this is back in the 70s, probably in about 5 or 10 minutes. And I was impressed by that. Because if I lost that kind of money in 5 or 10 minutes, I'd be a little upset. But this guy showed nothing. And what he did was he asked one of the guys that ran the games, can I send your friend, meaning me, out to my car? I want him to get something for me. And he told me go into his car, and it was a brand new Jaguar. And I went into the trunk of his car, took out a sack, and brought it into him, and it was a bag full of money. And he started gambling again. So it got my curiosity, and I finally said to my friend, I said, what does this guy do that he gets that kind of money, and it's not even bothering him that he's losing it? He said, well, he's a drug dealer. He's from Harlem, and he's a big-time drug dealer. In my head, that got me going, and I wanted that. I wanted the Jaguar. I wanted to be able to lose $20,000. Not that I wanted to lose it, but that I would be able to lose it and it wouldn't even affect my life. So I started getting involved with drugs. But what happened is I started doing more drugs than I was selling. Now, because my reputation was what it was in them days, they wouldn't come and try to hurt me or anything like that because they knew that probably they'd end up on the other side of that. So what they did was they started cutting off my supply of drugs. So I was running out of people helping me to continue the life that I was living. So I got addicted to drugs. I got addicted to cocaine. Later on, when all the supply started disappearing and I was losing everything that I had, crack cocaine came into the neighborhood. Now, I don't know if some of you might remember Richard Pryor back in the late 70s. He made this big spotlight about freebasing cocaine, and he went on fire, and they spread this media all over about this new drug that was out there. Well, that only excited me a little bit more, and I figured that's Hollywood, you know, it's the way we need to go, and I got involved with that. And before you know it, it's crack cocaine. So I went from Robert, the up-and-coming star in the Gambino crime family, to Robert the crackhead. I was told a while back that I needed to go to Florida, that they weren't happy with the life that I was living. And it wasn't a suggestion. It was something that I knew if I didn't do, I'd probably wind up in a ditch somewheres. Just before that happened, this girl that I was going out with, got pregnant, and I was going to have a little girl. And I say that there to say this because at that time, I thought having a daughter would maybe stop some of the life that I was living. It would be something that I would have to care for, something that would be depending on me. And I really thought that that was going to change my life a little bit. Now, I want you to remember this here. I didn't want to change what I was doing. I just wanted to change the consequences, and there's a big difference. So my daughter was born. 7 weeks after she was born, I had an argument with her mother, and I decided to go out and have one more flea with time with crack cocaine, and that's the last time I see my little girl. Her mother decided that I wasn't capable of being a dad, and she was right at that time, and that she didn't want me around her daughter. I was being a bad influence. And that's when these guys came to me, and they found out all that was going on in my life, and they said, you know, you need to go. My mom was living in Florida, and they suggested I go stay with my mom and clean up my act a little bit, and I did do that. I went to Florida, cleaned up my act, but they ended up coming down to Florida, the wise guys, and they gave me something to do down there because now I was in good standings with them all over again. And before you know it, I don't know if it was a vicious cycle or what, but I was back on crack cocaine again. I got everything that I lost, and then when I got everything I lost, I decided to go out and have a good time for myself. So that became a big thing for me. And living with my mom, she couldn't take me anymore. It's the first time my mom ever in her life told me I can't stay there anymore, that she left me on my own. And I went to New York, and I was supposed to go back into a rehab called Daytop. It was a drug rehab. And before I got in, when I landed in New York, I ran into a friend of mine before I got into it, and long story short, I was back on crack cocaine again. In 1976, somebody came over to me, and they showed me a newspaper. In the newspaper, it's me, my name, with a bunch of other guys that was wanted for a federal crime called racketeering, a RICO Act in Florida. At that time, I also got in trouble for selling crack cocaine to an undercover agent, and it seemed like my life was just crumbling. I got locked up. What happened is I had a visit by 2 angels. Now, do you believe in angels? But they weren't your typical angels. They didn't have halos, and they didn't have any wings. They had 2 guns. See, I fell out on somebody's house, and I got a tap on the foot. When I say fell out, that means passed out, just in case. And I got a tap on my foot. When I looked up, there was 2 pistols pointed at me. And I didn't know which way that was going to happen. I don't know if they were cops because they were undercover, or if they were guys from my old friends who thought that they needed to get rid of me. But I was arrested, and I call them my angels today because that's the last day I ever did a drug or a drink or a crime. So I called them my angels. I got locked up, was brought to Rikers Island. I'm in Rikers Island, and you know what I know to do because I've been in and out of prisons and jails a lot of my times from hanging out with the wise guys, getting arrested for different things. I needed to get an attorney because I need to get a good attorney to get me out of the mess that I got myself into. That's the first thing I usually do when I get locked up. And the second thing is I need to get some money into my commissary so I could live as comfortable as I can while I'm in jail because I know I'm not going to get bailed this time. So I started calling up everybody, all my old friends, and try to lose my influence, and everybody was saying, no, no, no. You know what the sad thing is that my daughter's mom thought, now that I'm in jail, that I could talk to my daughter over the phone. So I call up this one girl, and I'm talking to her, and I said, you know, I need commissary money. I need about $3,000. I could retain an attorney to help me out with the case and move forward and get things going. And she said to me, why don't you read your Bible? So I take it as a brush off. You know, she's just going to ignore it. She don't want to give me any money. I mean, what am I going to do? Read a Bible and find money in it, you know? So I passed that up. But my daughter was talking to me over the phone, and I'm talking to her while I'm in Rikers Island, and she's crying. And I said, because her name is Brianna, I said, Brianna, why are you crying? And she said, because you won't come and see me. Now, I'm not medicated on any drugs. There's nothing that I can do, but I have to deal with this. And the pain was so great that my heart just broke to pieces. You see, because I remember so many times I was maybe a block, 2 blocks away from my daughter. And instead of even attempting to go see her, trying to reconcile with her mom, I'd rather go and get high. And it just shattered my heart. And I started to cry, but I didn't want the guys in Rikers Island to see me cry, so I slammed down the phone. I ran back to my cell. Now the only prayer I knew was the rosaries. You see, I believe I knew of God, but I didn't know God, and there's a big difference. And I got down on my hands and knees, and I cried out, and I said, God, if you're real, either have someone kill me or change me. And as you can see, God answered the latter of that cry, because I'm here talking to you right now. And I said the rosaries over and over again, and then I listened to that girl said, I remember what she said, and I went and got a Bible. Now, when I was in jail, I would get all kinds of books. I was a big Robert Ludlum fan, and espionage was one of my big things. I would read his books, but the more I started reading the Bible, the more I felt something inside of me saying, you need more of this and less of those other books. And I started giving out all my books. You see, what I believe happened to me when I made that sincere, honest cry to God, which I think is the most powerful prayer I could have ever prayed in my life, was, God, help me. God, please help me. I cannot stay and live with this pain anymore. I believe I was born again that moment. Now, I don't know how that all works out. But I took that there. Now, an opportunity came. I was talking to my mom, and my mom said, you know, these federal agents keep coming by, and they keep giving me your card, and they need your help. They want you to cooperate with them. And finally, I gave up. You see, because I think the most saddest, desperate time in my life, the time that I felt completely hopeless, was when everybody that I loved and cared about thought I was better off in jail than out in the streets. So I told up my mom, I said, give me the guy's phone number. I called him up and called up the agent, and I said, what is it that I can do for you? Now, I want to be honest with you. I was just trying to get myself out of a mess that I got myself into. And they said, if you fully cooperate with us, we'll put you in the witness protection program, and we'll try to help you out with your crimes and stuff like that. And I agreed with them. They came, picked me up, went to Florida. Now, you think that you're working with the government, life might get a little bit easier, especially inside the prison since they run it all. But it didn't happen that way. It was a tough battle for me. My family didn't agree what I was about to do. A lot of people were totally against me. My life was in danger at that point in time. But I went forward anyway. I was transferred over into, I got sentenced. I got a couple of years instead of the many years that I should have gotten, which I believe is only through the mercy of God, and he just used the government to do that. And I got shipped to another prison called Indian River County Jail, and over there they have 2 Bible studies, so I'm getting more of God in my life, reading the Bible more and understanding more about God. And I did that for about a year. There's one time that there's going to be something was going on, and I got rededicated to my life. Let me just say this. I want to say rededicated because this is what I believe in. I'm not trying to mess with anybody's theology. You see, I've made many commitments in my life, many commitments, and I broke so many of them. When God was calling me, I don't think he was calling me to make a commitment. I believe God was calling me to surrender. You see, when I surrendered my life to him and gave him full control over it, it's not that I don't mess up. It's not that I don't go astray every now and then or thoughts come into my head. I'm not perfect, but I strive for it. And I believe that's only because of the reason the Holy Spirit coming and living inside of me that enables me to do these things. But I knew I had to surrender. Because see, when you surrender, you're no longer in control anymore. When you make a commitment, you still have a little control there. So I surrendered my life to God. I got rebaptized all over again. I was about to get released from prison. A lot of people in the jail was telling me that it's just a jailhouse conversion. And it kind of made me think a lot because I'm going to be released pretty soon. Just backtrack a little bit. Because the person who I loved the most and the person who I did so much damage to the most was my mother. And witnessing to my mom had given her life to Christ over the phone from me being in prison. But my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And that was a concern for me. You see, I believe what happened at that point in time when the government was going to come and snatch me up and put me back out to the streets again, and I was going to get a new identity. And they did do that there. But 6 weeks before I was about to be released, I would put my head in the Bible and I would pray. I would lay on the floor, put my head in the Bible, and I would pray, God, let your word penetrate my mind so I would never forget it. And then I would move up and put my heart into the Bible, and I would pray, God, let your word penetrate my heart that I fully understand it and I can live it out. Now, I don't believe there's anything magical about what I did, but I think the sincerity of what I wanted in my life at that point in time, God answered those prayers. So now I'm going to get released, and of course, the government picks you up and they have to take you to this place, and I don't even know where the place is. If you ever want to scare an ex-mobster, put him in a van that has no windows. You'll scare him. And that's what they did. They put me in a van. There was no windows and none. I couldn't see outside, couldn't see. And I go into a building. I don't know where it is, but I know I'm underground somewheres. And they take me out and they put me into this room. And then they have to evaluate you and where they're going to put you and place you in society with a new identity. And I went along with all that. Of course, I didn't have a choice at that time anyway. They were in full control of my life. So they put me in the room and they say, okay, you can keep your last name, but you have to change. You can keep your first name, but you have to change your last name. And I said, okay. So they come in and they say, okay, give us a last name. And I would give them a name, and they would come back like 5 minutes later and say, no, that's not good. And this went on for a little bit, and I just happened to be watching at that time on TV a show called MASH. And in MASH, there's only one episode, there's a Dr. Borelli. You know where I'm going, right? The only regret I have, instead of saying, I just said Borelli, and they said, okay, that's your name. The only regret I have, I'm thinking if I would have said Dr. Borelli, maybe I would have came out with a PhD. I'm not sure if they would have let that go or not. And that's how I got the name Borelli, because my name before that there wasn't even Italian. It was Robert Engel. And you'll see a lot of that if you buy the book. Tells the story a little bit more in depth than when I'm telling it. So I get the name. Now they have to send me someplace. And I love, God is very comical in some ways. You know how he works? And I'm asking them where I'm going. They said, we can't tell you. I believe God gave me a taste of what Abraham had to go through. Remember in Genesis chapter 12, he tells him, pack up everything and go to this land, and he doesn't know where he's going. He said, you're just going to go. Well, they sent me to San Antonio, Texas, and if that ain't a foreign land for a New Yorker, nothing is. And I wind up in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm missing everybody. I can't have any contact. You see, what happened is when you get into the witness protection program, and I want to point this out because I believe is very important for all of us. And what God had showed me, and I appreciate so much that he showed me in a way that I could fully understand how it relates to my spiritual life. You see, you go into the witness protection program, they give you a new name, they give you a new social security number, they give you a new birth certificate. It's basically who I was no longer lives, and who they made me out to be is who I am today. You see, the slate was wiped clean. If you look up my record, you'll find nothing of me ever being in prison. I have a brand new start as Robert Borelli in this world. But you see, God did the same thing to me in my spiritual life. See, when I was born again, he said, I'm wiping your slate clean. I'm giving you a new identity. You've been born again. You're no longer Robert Engel. You're Robert Borelli. And he did the same thing in my spirit. So I could really identify with that so much about being born again. And I thank God that he showed it to me in a way that I could fully understand it. You see, because I'm no longer who I used to be. All things have passed away. All things are new. I have a new start in Christ Jesus, and I have a new start in this world as Robert Borelli. And I thank God for that very much. But it wasn't easy. My mom had passed away I didn't know my mom passed away until 3 days after she died, because nobody knew where I was. They didn't know how to get in touch with me. The other sad part was I couldn't even go to her funeral because it was in New York, and that was a place that I wouldn't be able to go. I couldn't go out of this vicinity that they placed me in. So there was a lot of heartaches with my daughter, and I thought, you know, being a Christian and being full of the Holy Spirit and God working in me and through me, that would change, and that didn't change neither. Didn't have a wife, didn't have anybody with me. Went to San Antonio, Texas, all by myself with $300 in my pocket and the same clothes. And I had to try to make a new life. Now, the government does help you in certain ways, but believe me, it's not what you see on TV. If you ever seen something like that on TV, it's nothing like that. Trust me. I remember when I found out my mom passed away, I was crying, and I was crying out to God, and I said, I don't understand this here. I said, if anybody, see if you can relate to this. The love that God put in me is a love that I never experienced before. It's called agape love. It's a Christ love that only He can give. And that's the love I wanted to give my mom, because I loved my mom, but not that way, because I didn't know about it. And I thought if anybody deserved to get that love, it was my mother before anybody else. And I heard God speak to me, just like I'm speaking to you. And He said, maybe you can't give it to your mom, but there's a lot of other moms and dads that can use that love. And from that birthed what we call a nursing home ministry that I started doing. And I did it for 13 years, and I still work with the seniors today. So I believe that God puts something in you and it makes you go through pain, because I don't believe God ever wastes a hurt. I think if you're going through something the way I went through, God wants to use it so that could be used to glorify Him in whatever setting that might be. So I did that in San Antonio for a while, and then I got married to a lady that is from New York, and that was something I was not supposed to do, and the government found out about it, and I was thrown out of the witness protection program. That's why I can talk to you about that today, in case anybody knows. Now, I don't have any protection around me, at least not the government, but I definitely have a mighty, a powerful protection. That's God Almighty. That happened. I got married, and people found out where I was, and the whole thing started up, and the government said, okay, you're no longer in the program. They hung up on me and left me out to dry, and I was okay with that at that point in time. And then my wife and me, we moved to Dallas, Texas. I went to Christ for the Nations. I'm not sure if you know, it's a Bible Institute, and I went there for 2 years. Then I went to Baptist Criswell College for a year and got more educated there. I had a hunger to know more about God, and I'm glad that He worked it out in 2 different denominations completely. But, you know, I kind of got like in the middle of all that there. I got a little bit of a taste of both, and I'm grateful to God for that. It came just recently, you know, my daughter, we was praying, me and my wife would be praying for my daughter, and my prayer was not that the mom so much that I was mad at them, but that God would just soften their hearts, that they could understand a little bit more. And that did happen. About 5 years ago, my wife found my daughter on Facebook. Now, I don't know too much about Facebook and stuff, especially back then. And she said, what do you want to do? And I said, man, we just need to pray. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to do anything that might cause more trouble. You know, what I really wanted to do is just, let's go there and, you know, but I knew that I needed to look out for everybody, and we prayed for a couple of months, and I said, you know what, email her back and say, I don't know what her mom is telling her. Maybe they're telling her I'm dead or whatever it is, and I said, just tell her that, don't tell her you're married to me, but just tell her that you know me and I'm doing okay. And she immediately replied back and gave a phone number, and I called her and I cried like a little baby, and me and my daughter are united again. It's not the way I like it to be right now, but there's a lot of scars, a lot of hurt that God has to heal there. My daughter is not saved. She's living just the same life that I used to live before I got saved. But I say that to say this here, because I've been blessed. You see, you understand that God, mercy and grace go hand in hand. I thank God for his mercy because he didn't give me what I deserve. You see, I deserve to be in prison for the rest of my life. There's a lot of people back home who cannot forgive me for the things that I did to them or their families. And then you have God's grace. You see, because God's grace, he gave me what I didn't deserve. That's a fresh new start in life. A fresh new opportunity to walk with him according to his word. And I take that pretty serious. So I thank God for that every day. Things aren't actually all great and all fine and all well and good. Young people, man, I'll tell you this here, man. I didn't get an education. And even though God's full of grace and mercy, didn't change some of my circumstances. I have to do valet parking now because I don't know anything else to do. I know how to drive a car, so that's what I do. And I say that because I would talk to you like I would talk to my daughter. My daughter's 21 years old. I know you're a little bit younger than that there. Is please, man, get the education you can so you don't have to live life hard. Make some sacrifices now so you'll have the benefits later on in life. And for moms and dads, I say this here, man. Another thing, young guys, man, know what I miss the most? When I think back, that I couldn't be a better son, a better brother, a better uncle, a better dad. And take your family seriously, man, because at the end, that's what really counts. And for everybody else, man, just, you know, maybe you know somebody, maybe it's in your life, maybe it's somebody down the corner from you, you walk by, and they look like they're completely hopeless. Don't give up on them. Don't give up on them. Nobody's hopeless when it comes to God. Addictions, you know, what I love the most, well, I keep saying the most because I love everything, you know. I mean, God is complete. You know, I have 2 dogs now, and I cry if I have to spank one of them. I mean, that's just me today. I'm usually, they call me the weeping pastor, so I cry a lot. But the thing that really grabs me the most is how God could take a life of ashes and make it into a diamond. And that's what he's done for me, and he could do for anybody. Anybody that's in your family, outside of your family, a neighbor next door, the guy that you're walking down the street past might be begging for money. Pray for them, man, because I believe it's through the prayers of my mom that God answered later on in life. And I don't know if she could see all that. I don't know how that works up in heaven. But I know that somehow God's letting her know that that boy, you see, I was the kid that nobody's family wanted their kids to hang out with. I brought a lot of shame into my mom's life. I was a kid that nobody expected to live past 20 years old. And just last week, I was 60 years old. So God is a God of miracles. God is a God of hope. Now let me just leave you with this here. I may not be everything that you want me to be. And I'm definitely not everything that I want me to be. But I thank God that by the blood, death, the resurrection of his Son, Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, I'm no longer who I used to be. Thank you, and God bless you.
Well, I'm going to give you first shot. You're the boss. Sorry, whoever that was over there.
I want to know about your program with the homeless boys in Kenya.
I'm sorry I left that out. Yeah, let me share a little bit about that. I'm going to come back up here. I feel taller again, you know. But yeah, what God has done in my life, because I mentioned a lot of things, but I didn't mention how he has changed my life as far as with ministry. In 2012, there was friends of mine that were going to Kenya, and they asked me to go. And I don't told them my mission is Texas. I mean, that's a mission for me already. But I ended up going with them, and what we were going to do is we were going to do a marriage retreat for the men, because kind of the culture there is that a lot of the men don't recognize their children or interact with their children or their spouses. So we were trying to teach them how a Christian should be living as a husband and father. And while we were there, we were doing that there, and this pastor took me to a field. And in this field, there was some kids, and he said this is their home base. And I asked him, well, what does that mean? You know, because I played like Ringo Levio and games like that. We had a home base, but I didn't stay there or live there. So he said it's where they live. So I was walking to them to meet them, and I'm telling you, I seen one kid, and what I seen in his face was me. Completely hopeless. How I felt when I was in prison, when nobody wanted to talk to me, nobody wanted to be around me, nobody wanted to help me. Like, this is my life. Robert the crackhead, I'm going to die Robert the crackhead with no hope. I seen that in that boy's life, and I just started crying. And I asked some stories about what was going on with them. And there was about, probably at that time, I think about 12 of them from the ages of 8 to about 14 years old. And he said that this is where they live. They have no families. Either their families threw them out, or their moms died of AIDS, or something happened that they're left out in the street. And I said, well, where do they sleep? And he said, in the fields with the animals. And I said, how do they eat? They go out and they rob, or they go on banana trucks, or whatever it is that they need to do, sex, whatever, to sell drugs, whatever it is to make a living. And I said, well, what can we do? And he said, well, a lot of people come here and see them, and they promise them a lot of things, but they don't do anything once they leave. And I said, well, I promise you I'm going to do something for them. Now, I had some money in my pocket, and I gave it to them, and I said, I want you to take all these kids to have a meal. I don't want them to go out and have to rob for their next meal. And I said, when I go back to the States, I promise you that I won't forget them. And I tell you this, I've kept that promise. I've been sending them money, not just me, but people that I do fundraisers and stuff. So this is what we're doing. I met with the pastor from Africa. He's from Rift Valley Fellowship. He's a pastor in Rift Valley. I met with him a couple of months ago to find out what was going on. I was sending him $300 a month, and that would feed about 35 kids, one meal a day for 5 days a week. And then they had rented a property with a house on it. It's not like a house that we have here. It's kind of like a one-room cinder block building, and they put 4 kids in there, and the pastor watches over them. And I said, well, what can we do more? And he said, for $1,000 a month, I could get 12 more kids, places to go, and we could still feed the same amount of kids. So I promised him that I would come up with $1,000 this year every month to give them. The big project is this year. For $60,000 or $70,000, excuse me, we could buy property, put a building to house all these kids. Right now, there's between 35 and 40, but they're all starting to come around from the streets to this church. And I promised them that I would try to raise that there within the next year or two. So we could buy a building. If we buy a building, we buy property, we'll own it, we won't have to rent it. And then in Kenya, to go to school, you have to pay. You have to pay for your books, you have to pay for your taught. And I said, well, wouldn't it be easier, because we want to do that, we want to get them educated, that we could bring a teacher, and the teacher would pay the teacher, and he could teach them all there and to save a lot more money. So that's kind of where we are with that right now. And just about the book's basically, it's not an autobiography, for the simple fact is that we had to change some names and some things that the author had to put in there, because I didn't remember everything clearly. I mean, we're going back, I don't even want to say, but we're going back long time. So that's there. It's $15 a piece. Every book that sells, this is what me and Scott Hunt, it took us 3.5 years. Well, it took him 3.5 years to write it. I didn't write anything about the book. I just want to be open and honest about it. It's my story, me and him meeting for 3.5 years until we finally got it where we thought it would be. So it's not something that was just written to be thrown out there. It was a lot of prayer, a lot of thought put into it. hopefully the story glorifies God, not about who I was, but what God can do with somebody like me and transform and change their life completely. That's what I'm, but every book sold, $1 goes to the Kenya Street Boys. So somebody said, how many books you need to sell? I said, well, if I sell 70,000 books, yeah, now I don't think we're going to do that today, but but that's kind of what I'm doing. I go around speaking like this here. I go all over the place. We also have a crusade team, and there's about 6 of us that go out to churches, and we do 5 days crusades. Scott Camp, Dr. Scott Camp is the lead. It's called Discover Joy Ministries. And I go there and share with the men my story, and then a lot of other things go on. So that's what I do with my life besides trying to do valet parking and put food on my table. So, anybody else? Did I answer your question?
One thing I was going to say, and I mentioned it earlier, there's a basket out there for cash donations, and all that money is going to go to the Kenya program. Somebody over here had a question.
You were talking about Christ for the Nations. I just wondered if you happened to run across Carol Thompson or Victor Thompson.
I did, yes.
Hello. They happen to be my brother-in-law and nephew.
Okay,
So-
yeah, he was teaching there when I was there in 2002, and I left in 2004, and then I went to Criswell College for 2005.
Yeah, I think he still is part-time. He's kind of semi-retired.
Yeah, I still affiliate with them a little. Matter of fact, I'm ordained from Christ for the Nations as a minister. So I go there and affiliate with them, but I haven't seen Carol in a while. So.
Yeah.
But also his son, his son used to come in and teach every now and then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wondered, since you mentioned Christ for the Nations.
Yeah. Listen, you can ask whatever questions you want. I mean, I'm open and very honest.
Anyone from the Gambino family still looking for you?
You know, that's a question I get a lot. The question I usually get a lot is, are you afraid that people will find you because you're out on Facebook, you're selling books, you put your last name out there and all that? And this is what I'm going to tell you. And I hope it makes sense to you because it makes a lot of sense to me. In the Bible, it says we need to walk by faith, not by sight. Now, I'm not talking about presumptuous faith, but I think we need to sometimes put that into practice, right? I have to trust God. I believe God has called me to tell a story, to maybe bring hope into somebody's life, and to encourage people to continue. Let's look at life, man. You know, I hear a lot of pastors saying that everything is beautiful. I don't see it. So I try to bring hope and inspiration to people who might be having struggles with their walk with God or just outside of God. So, and I believe if God's called me to do something, I need to do what He's called me to do and leave the results up to Him. And just think about what's the worst that can happen to me. I'm heaven bound. So, to me, it's a win-win situation. I can stay down here and do what God's asked me to do, or I could go be with Him in heaven. I mean, Paul had a little bit of a problem with that too, didn't he? Yeah, so that's just how I look at it. So yeah, every now and then, I won't tell you I'm completely fearless of it all, you know. I try to use some of my street knowledge that I have a lot of in areas of that there, but I think God is really, listen, if I go into the witness protection program and have to depend on the government, how could I not depend on God? He's a lot bigger than they are.
I had a friend who's been dead now for several years, but his uncle was Vito Genovese.
Excuse me?
Vito Genovese?
Vito Genovese, yes.
Yeah, he was a relative.
That was your friend?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm out of here.
Yeah, it was his dad. He married Paul Genoa's daughter.
Excuse me?
Paul Genoa?
I'm son.
Well, it's probably the Jersey family. But
Oh, Jersey.
Jersey
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I mean, I really don't want to get into the politics of the mob, but anything really that came from Jersey, what they used to, I don't, anybody see The Sopranos? Okay. You don't know what they said, right? The guys from New York said, I don't know if you watch all the episodes, it's a glorified, yeah, it's a glorified crew. They were really not really recognized so much by the New York five families. But Genovese is a little bit different. Genovese is one of the bosses.
Yeah. Well,
Was one of the bosses.
Vince is, he broke away from the family, and the family got back to him later on by hanging his son in the barn. And he was 12 years old when they got him. So.
Well, believe it or not, there's a couple of people that were really deeper than I was, because I was an associate of the mob. I wasn't a made member because I didn't have an Italian last name. I couldn't. I mean, I got the respect that I deserved. Well, the respect, I would say deserved, but demanded. But there's a couple other people. One is Michael Franzese. He was a captain in the Colombo family. His dad right now is doing 7 years at the age of 93 years old in federal prison. And his dad was one of the bosses. And Michael Franzese got saved in prison and changed his whole life around. He goes around speaking also, and he wrote a book called The Blood Covenant. So if you ever want to check out another book. And then there's also a guy called Joe Donato, and this was back in the 60s, that Joe Donato was also a made man in the Gambino crime family, and he gave his life to Christ, and he wrote a book called Tell It to the Mob.
I remember in your book, you all remember the name John Gotti? He refers to him in his book.
Well, John Gotti come from my neighborhood. I grew up with his younger brother. John was a little bit older than I was, so we go back a lot of years. Matter of fact, his brother Billy used to go out with my sister. So, like I said, the neighborhood was very neighborhoodish. We all knew each other, we knew our families, and we all looked out for one another. Something I like to see Texas, though. Not that part of it, though. No, not the mob part. No. I'm talking about the community, because it was really a strong community there.
Anyone else? Well, he'll be glad to stick around, I'm sure, if you want to visit with him afterwards. We sincerely appreciate all of you being here. Remember, next week we're going to have ICC. It's folks who have mission work that they're doing in Haiti and Dominican Republic. They are friends and family, somewhat, of Judy and Reagan. And they're coming down from Denison to be here. And they will be visiting with us. And I think we've gotten off to a wonderful start. You've had a terrific message. I enjoyed having lunch with you a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, thank you.
I sat there all the time, watched people walk in the front door to see who they were. Well, anyway, Robert, we thank you sincerely. His wife's name is Patricia also. I wish she could have been here, but she was unable to be here. And we will pray for you, and we bless you in all your work and the message that you brought to us this evening.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And by the way, yeah, you can't pray for my wife. I forgot to say that in the beginning. The reason why she's not here, she's sick. She's been sick, and then she just yesterday got diagnosed with COPD, so she's really having a hard time breathing and all that. So, the doctor said there's no cure for it, so we just have to do what we do. And I said, well, I know another physician that has a cure for everything. So we just, if you can, remember her name is Patricia Borelli. Lift her up in prayers. Thank you.